Starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to welcome you to the second webinar in our Beyond the EU series as we look at new markets around the world which UK exporters could consider sailing into following Brexit. Today we are looking at Latin America. My name is William Barnes-Graham and I am the Digital Content Manager at Open to Export. We are a government-supported online community helping small UK businesses get ready to sell overseas through our step-by-step articles and guides, regular webinars, Ask the Experts forum, our Export Action Plan tool, all of which you can find on our website at www.opentoexport.com. We will be running a live Q&A at the end of the session, and you can ask questions at any point during this webinar using the question box on the control panel to the right-hand side of your screen. We will also be reposting relevant questions onto our forum afterwards, so hopefully in one way or another we'll get to all of your questions in some way. We don't typically share any slides from the webinars, but we do record the sessions and upload them onto YouTube, as well as linking to all the sessions on our webinars page. So do have a look on there after the webinar if you want a recording of this one, and also to look out for future webinars. We have two great speakers today. First, giving an overview of Latin America as a region. In general, we have Jeff Lewis from Resultz Ltd, an export-import training company with lots of experience helping businesses sell into the continent. After that, we have Philip Gray from Brazil Business Hub, who partnered with the Department of International Trade to help businesses sell into South America, which is of course of course South America's largest country in Brazil. But to begin with, over to you, Jeff.
Good afternoon. Hope you can all hear me clearly. My name's Jeff Lewis, and I've been involved in business in Latin America for some good years now, and alongside the training we've been able to put together a profile of some of the things that you need to consider when looking into doing business in Latin America. As you can imagine, it's a big area, so this is a very brief overview, but hopefully it will give you some ideas. Next slide. As you can see, just a few figures there about the size of the markets. They are significant, and they do cover a lot of the similar industry sectors that you would find in your current export markets. Automotive, chemicals, oil and gas, but also small groups of businesses that give you plenty of opportunity to sell your products. So even if you're not servicing the big industry sectors, you should and will be able to get an opportunity in Latin America. Next slide. The one thing you need to be aware of is that Latin America is a very interesting place as far as culture is concerned. It is an area where family relationships are very important. But from a sales point of view and a developmental point of view, it's also very important that it is a market you visit. Obviously, in the initial stages, you're not going to be in a position just to fly out there, because you do need to do quite a lot of due diligence in this market, due to the fact really that the import regulations, duties, all that sort of thing are a little bit more stricter, and obviously the rates of duty can in some cases be a lot higher. However, when you do get there, trade mission or whichever way you go, then you need to consider the fact that you will need to bond socially and business-wise in a relationship with your people over there. And also, it's a good idea to try and learn a little bit of Spanish. It will give you an edge as far as dealing with people and dealing with end users. And if you are thinking about Venezuela, then do some research before you go, because out of the major markets, it's probably the one that would be the least beneficial to visit, unless you've got a very, very good partner. So do some good research for that area. Next slide. Latin America is a big area. Okay. Now, if we're traveling from the UK to one of the major cities, the flights, you can get flights to all the major centres there. There's no problem. Sometimes you have to go through Europe to get there, and the costs aren't that expensive. But it's an area, obviously, you're going out there, you do need to make sure that you make the most of your time. So if you're going to go to, say, Buenos Aires, then it's always worthwhile to go over to Santiago. But just bear in mind the distances. If you do plan to go between Mexico and Argentina, then that is a long haul flight in itself. Other things to bear in mind, the altitude. In some areas, if you are traveling to a region, take US dollars, that's always be fine. Again, learn a little bit more Spanish, but for a first time, it would be worth your while, if you're going to develop this market region, to go out with a trade mission. If there are trade missions going out, then that's maybe the most cost-effective way, and also you'd be able to travel in a group. It is a little bit of a dangerous area, but if you go in the right areas, then you'll be fine. And if you are a vegetarian, then do some research beforehand. Next slide. Now, you may deal direct to some areas where you currently export. I would recommend at this point, if you are going to develop into Latin America, that you look at a third-party partner. Obviously, what they give you is the local market knowledge, existing client database. They'll have a lot more information on your competitors. Sales team, as I said, it's a large area, so you know, coverage is quite important. You may visit, say, for example, Chile and go to Santiago, and if you're dealing in the mining industry, that's way north into Chile. So it'd be very difficult for you to actually deal with customers direct on that basis. The culture, always massively important when you're dealing in regions such as Latin America. You can quite easily offend people if you don't follow the culture. So that would be another reason why, again, the communication. What you will tend to find is if you go through this route, your contact may speak English, or probably will speak English, and if you haven't got a brilliant knowledge of the Spanish language, then that's going to be a big help for you. Your marketing obviously is going to be included in Spanish, Spanish websites, things like this. So it's very difficult for you to do that from this area. And the other thing as well is you'll tend to find, probably in most areas of the world where you've done business, is people will want exclusivity and say, I can do this country, I can do that country. Don't get tied into too many complex geographical agreements as far as people representing you. Try and keep it per country, due really to the fact that the differ in local import regulations. That does make it difficult to do business that way. Next slide. What you should also be looking at and be aware of is the current preferential trade agreements that we have with countries in Latin America. Mexico, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador. It's always a good idea to bear this in mind. One of the things you will find when you do your research into the markets, when you start looking at landed cost of your products, competitive advantage of your products, whatever industry sector you're in, you will find that import duties can be double-digit, and that does have a big effect on the cost of your products into each country. The other thing to bear in mind as well is the distance you're going to be shipping your products. The reason being is that the landed cost calculations into the Latin markets is done on a CIF value basis. In other words, they take the cost of shipping into consideration. So when you are looking at doing business there, you need to look at how your goods are packed. You need to look at the best shipping arrangements for you. You need to take that all into consideration when you are comparing your products locally, due to the fact that at the end of the day you can waste a lot of money if you go out to the market without doing these cost calculations and market research. You can waste money because it may not be cost effective for you to do it. So always have a look at that, and also as well know your responsibility. Your goods are going over a long period, a long distance, so you'll need to know what you're responsible for, and obviously ensure that during your negotiations with your customers and your third parties that you do not go along the lines of taking responsibility for your import duties and taxes, because that again could wipe out your profitability in that region. Next slide. And just as an example, I was involved with a company selling into the corrosion test industry sector, and we were up against competition from the USA, obviously Mexico being in NAFTA, and the distributor was complaining about pricing. He was asking about extra discount to win the business, etc., etc. Unbeknownst to him was the preferential trade agreement that the European Union has with Mexico. So when checking tariffs into the areas where we do have preferential trade, it was found in this particular instance that the import duty was 15%. Thus, with the addition of an EUR1 from the Chamber of Commerce costing £30 or so, we were able to offer a 15% discount without reducing our margins to get the products into the market, and obviously that then helped us win the business. So when you are looking at this region, make sure you look at all the opportunities to reduce the landed cost because of the implication of taxes and extra taxes that are applicable when you import. So it's always a good idea to do your due diligence as far as your costs are concerned. And finally, it is a big market. There's lots of industry sectors. You'll find a lot of presentations about, the automotive industry, the chemical industry. Yes, all the big industries are there, but so are the small ones as well. I mean, if you're selling into the consumer electronics industry, if you're selling into the food industry, if you're selling into electronics accessories business, there are opportunities for you there. But you do need to make sure you do extra due diligence into this market due to the fact that the landed costs could obviously affect your competitiveness, and that needs to be done ideally before you start to do any business. Next slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Really fantastic, concise and very informative overview there of what's a very diverse and vibrant set of markets. And among those markets is, of course, Brazil. And so I'm going to now hand over to Philip to talk on Brazil.
Hi everybody, my name is Phil Gray. I'm the director of the Brazil Business Hub. What we do is to help management teams to answer the fundamental question, is Brazil a good idea for us? And then to actually engage the market in Brazil. Can we have the next slide please, Will? So why do business in Brazil? Firstly, it's a large marketplace. There's about 206 million people there. They do like us, they like the UK, they like our reputation for sophistication, quality, safety and good value for money. They like our integrity, our reputation for integrity, and that is a very big subject in Brazil right now. You may find that the reason some Brazilian customers want to talk to you is just the fact that you are British and that you are not a domestic supplier. One of the things I like about the Brits is that we tend to sit and listen. We don't impose ourselves on the discussion. They contrast us quite favourably with the Americans and the Germans in that respect. As I said, they like the UK. they're all very keen to come over here. They do a lot. There's a lot of Brazilian tourists come to London. They like coming to London to shop. They like the UK education and health systems. So a lot of my conversations with Brazilians are around family issues, around buying property and putting children into education here, university, and this sort of thing. So there's a very good vibe, if you like, between the UK and Brazil. Next slide, please, Bill. So just a few facts about Brazil. It is the 5th biggest country in the world. The scale is absolutely massive. 5,300 miles of coastline, 206 million people, 26 states, from the ultra-urban areas of Sao Paulo and Rio through to the Amazon rainforest and borders with, you know, very, very rural countries such as, you know, sort of Bolivia and Paraguay and these kind of countries. Typical flight times, Sao Paulo from London is about 12 hours, so it's not a particularly long haul flight. And the other factor is that the time zone changes are not that great, so you might be between 3 and 4 hours depending on the season behind us in terms of time. Next slide, please, Will. So the economy, it's currently the world's 9th largest economy. It tends to fluctuate. It did briefly become the 6th largest economy a few years ago, and it slipped slightly. They have had are still having some degree of recession out there. You will all have heard about the corruption issues that they've had. In many ways, it's a good news story because what we're hearing mostly about is the backlash to it and the really intense focus on cleaning up the corruption reputation that they've had. But also a degree of political turbulence as well, which is starting to resolve itself in a slightly more market-oriented government in power. It is the largest economy in Latin America. The Sao Paulo state, within which the city sits, is the largest economic and industrial hub in the Southern Hemisphere. Next slide, please, Will. So Brazilian language is Portuguese, most emphatically not Spanish. If you speak Spanish to them, they will generally tolerate you, but you won't be gaining many favourable points. If you can speak some Portuguese, even quite simple Portuguese, it is a they treat it very much as a compliment. While it's a uniform language, be aware of regional dialects, also some regional rivalries. So there is some sort of subliminal regional rivalries. You know, obviously we're all sort of southerners and northerners, but also between some of the cities as well, between Rio and Sao Paulo and things like this. There are some interesting sort of rivalries going on there. What you'll find is some people speak English. It's mainly senior management, some senior government people. You'll find anybody, you know, if they've had international exposure or been educated in America or other places. But once you dip down below that senior management level, you find the number of people able to speak English is much fewer. So there comes a point, you may have initial discussions and you get a very favourable impression about the English and cultural assimilation. But once you get down into the nitty-gritty, you will need to have Portuguese language skills and local Portuguese language skills available to you. Next slide, please, Will. So here are some areas where there are really good opportunities in Brazil. despite the recession that we've found. So I split these up into infrastructure, energy, engineering, healthcare, mining, IT, and professional services. So there is still a big focus on urban development. Brazil has a big air industry, so both manufacturing airplanes and also, you know, domestic and international air travel, so investments in airport infrastructure. Roads are a perennial issue. There's been a lot of investment in motorways and toll roads and so on. Ports as well. The expansion of the Panama Canal has led to a big wave of port infrastructure investment over the past few years, which is continuing. Water, sanitation, environmental cleanup, these issues, again, there's a lot of money both from private and public sector being invested in that. Power, solar power, wind, hydro, as well as oil and gas. Oil and gas is a huge industry out there. And within all that is the supply chain. As Jeff mentioned, you know, you're not just dealing with very large contracts and very large companies. There is a big network of supply chain industries in Brazil, and a lot of engagement at the small, the sort of large SME level. You know, companies that are already comfortable dealing overseas. Private healthcare and education. So the medical device market is very strong out in Brazil. They have a lot of innovative companies out there who are now starting to look to export healthcare and medical products from Brazil out to other markets, especially the Middle East. Mining, agribusiness are two of the biggest industries in Brazil. So the scale of the mining and agribusiness sectors in Brazil is enormous. IT and telecoms, professional services, financial technologies are all very active and innovative in their own right there. Next slide, please, Will. So winning and delivering business in Brazil, it's going to echo some of the points which Will made, but it's very much about personal contact and the willingness to repeat that contact. So you need to be able to go out to Brazil and go out again and again and again in order to develop a very strong relationship with your customers and partners out there. So it's about understanding the mindset, appearance. If you are dealing in Sao Paulo or Rio, you'll find it very familiar in terms of, you know, the expectation that, you know, you wear smart clothes and be well groomed and behave in a sort of European style. Very much about networking and ethics and integrity as well. So next slide, please, Will. So these are some of the technical elements. I've put them all in a mishmash there because it's very much the same as entering any other fairly complex, large marketplace. There's a huge number of issues that have to be dealt with, from engaging partners, finding clients, sorting out imports, processes and costs, accurate costing, taxation, intellectual property protection. You may decide that, some companies decide that the best way to approach this is to set up a local manufacturing operation in Brazil, perhaps to do some element of assembly work or local sourcing of components, in which case you've got the issue of setting up a company, finding premises, recruitment, and so on. So there's an awful lot to think about, an awful lot of options and things that you need to make sure you get right first time. Next slide, please, Will. So the Brazil Business Hub, we're based in Ulster near Stratford-on-Avon in the West Midlands. We are very keen to hear about your plans and thoughts about Brazil and to see where we can help and add value for you. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Philip. Really useful to hear, obviously, about what's a massive market and obviously some great demand for UK products as well, which is always good to hear. We're now going to open the floor to questions. So please do ask questions using the control panel on the right-hand side. It's obviously a great opportunity for you guys to find out more about these markets. So the first one I'm going to ask is from Veronica, who's asked about the opportunities for business consulting and coaching in the region. So I'm going to put that to Jeff first, and then Philip, if you want to talk after Jeff about business coaching in Brazil. So Jeff.
Good question. I think if you, you know, from a service point of view, there are some opportunities there, but obviously you'd need to really get engaged in the culture of the country. The language issues, if you are going to be a consultant, I'm assuming you're talking about business consulting in the region itself. So you would need to have the expertise and to be able to engage with the people out there, because obviously providing a service in the region is actually quite difficult to do. Again, it could work through a partner, but what I would certainly advise that you would do some good due diligence as far as what you could offer and how you could support that offer as well. You know, would you be based out there, all that sort of thing. So it would need a lot of research, but not impossible to do.
Yep, Philip.
Yeah, I think I would echo some of the points Jeff's made in terms of consulting into Brazil to Brazilian clients. Very much you'd have to have people who are very comfortable talking in Portuguese. You'd have to be very tuned into the cultural fit. So the message that you give to a Western, to a European or American audience might not go well directly sort of leveled at the Brazilian audience. So you need to be very careful about what it is, what it is you're doing the coaching in. There's a lot of people who teach English as a foreign language out there. If you're doing consulting at a technical level, perhaps on an IT product, or at a very technical level in engineering or something like this, then absolutely there are some great opportunities. And I have seen on places like Compete For and some of the tendering websites, there have been adverts for Brazilian public sector organisations looking for consulting services on various issues, reorganisation and efficiency and stuff like that. So there are definitely some opportunities there.
Thank you, Philip. Next question I'm going to ask is a question which touches upon a point you made in your presentation, Philip. It's about language. It's from Trevor, and Trevor asks, in terms of, could you save costs on translation if you're exporting to both Brazil and Latin America in general by just doing Spanish, or would it be worthwhile spending that bit more money to get that Portuguese translation as well? So if that might be for your website or your export documents. So yeah, Philip.
I think if you're looking to address Brazil, the only sensible answer is to say you need to have your documentation in Portuguese. Both your sales documentation, your website, any documents that you submit to regulatory authorities, you need to have it in Portuguese. So, Brazil is the biggest market there, and it's worth it in my opinion.
Thank you. And you've had a few questions coming in about kind of different bits of documentation. I probably won't get too specific here just because obviously for the whole audience it won't necessarily be relevant right now. But in terms of finding out information about what piece of documentation you need for selling into Brazil or the region in general, what are the good places to start? Maybe Jeff, do you want to start on that one?
Yeah, one of the best areas and a free resource is called the Market Access Database, and it's a European website through the European Commission. And what they do is they've listed the tariffs, so you can look at different rates of tariffs for your product. And you can also look at the procedures and formalities per country. So if you just take the Latin countries, you know, you can look in there. That's where you'll find things like the preferential trade agreements. That's when you'll find things like what certificates of origin are required, what's required on your commercials, etc., etc. And it will also give you information about their own free trade agreements and preferential trade agreements in Latin America. It's an excellent source. It's free, and you can find a lot of information about the actual destinations you are actually going to sell to.
Thank you, Jeff. And a question we just had in from Kevin. This should probably be for you again, Jeff. It's about how receptive is Argentina to UK business? His understanding is that previously it was very protected, but this is now changing.
That's a damn good question. There was a sign when you came out of Ezeiza Airport, when you first landed in Buenos Aires, there used to be a sign there with Los Malvinas son Argentinas in huge great black letters, and that's been taken down now. There is obviously still a little bit of animosity out there. You're not going to get around it. The big problem with Argentina is the controls on imports that they've currently got in place. So the requirement to send information prior to exporting your products out there. But Argentina is currently struggling at the moment with slight recession. It's looking like it's going to come out of there. There is a little bit of animosity, I've got to be honest, but there is a lot of opportunity there, similar to Brazil with the automotive industry and the supporting industries. There is massive opportunities, but yes, good question. Bear it in mind that Argentina is a little bit more difficult than the other ones, not just for the import tax and duty regulations, but for the fact that we are from where we are, and we had a little bit of a fallout a few years ago. So it does need to you do need to bear that in mind.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, it was a need to be sensitive, I suppose, more than anything. We've had a question in from Rahul, who's from the UK IPO attaché in Sao Paulo, and he's just raising a point about kind of IP and saying that there's a backlog in registration for IP rights in Brazil. Philip, could you just quickly touch on kind of what's the situation with IP? How important is it to protect it in Brazil, given it's such a big market?
It's very important. Brazil is not a signatory to some of the global IP protection agreements. So you need to be quite vigilant in that what you think might be protected, you might have got what you think is a global patent or something like this. You need to make sure to see whether that's actually the case in Brazil. I think generally people find that they need to register intellectual property actually in Brazil itself. So it's very important before you start taking samples or you start sharing technical information that you want to keep protected, you need to make sure you understand the intellectual property status of what you're doing. Things like your website. If you want to start giving, encouraging Brazilians to look at your website, you need to make sure that you register the local variant. So, your website xyz.com, you need to make sure you've got xyz.com.br or .br.com, because you may find somebody pinches your domain name in Brazil. It actually happened. It's happened to some of my customers before I advised them on the issue, and I found that one of my websites had also been registered by someone else in Brazil. These are the sorts of things you need to be cute about, and this is why you need to talk to someone who's got experience in the marketplace.
Thank you, Philip. Do you
Can
have
I just add something
Yeah.
there? Well,
Please do. I was going to ask you to anyway.
oh right, okay, good. Just on the comments that Philip made there about the websites, and back to the marketing aspect of the websites, you can register local domains, which is absolutely super, but if you are going to use those websites, then what you also need to consider is actually having them hosted in the country where the domain name is registered. In other words, .com.br for Brazil or .cl for Chile, having them registered there, because the way Google works, it wouldn't see the relevance if you launched a website under a local Argentinian .com.ar if it was hosted in the UK. It would lose relevance. So you can get this done remotely, and it will help your search engine optimization, your search rankings in each country. But do bear in mind that if you do that, then the whole website needs to be in Spanish for the Latin market.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you both for really useful answers to that question. A question from Jessica, who's actually from Caracas, and she's asking about kind of what she's called unofficial costs. So she's talking about companies supposedly paying bribes to national guards to avoid losing landed costs and merchandise costs, and so she's asking about how do you deal with the unofficial aspects of exporting to Latin America. Jeff, do you want to start on that?
That's a damn good question. How do you deal with it? You deal with it on an individual basis, and you deal with it, you know, how you see fit. I mean, there is lots and lots of different taxes and regulations that get charged. There's lots of different costs to get goods through quicker. There's lots of different little incentives to pass goods through without the recognised documentation. So really and truthfully, there's no set answer to that one. That is a case of having a good third party on the ground, somebody who knows the import regulations, or at least the customs regulations, to help you, which then sort of like should encourage you to look for a third party rather than trying to do it yourself. So no real clear answer to that one, I'm afraid. It is on a case-by-case basis. It happens. I think you just need to deal with it and have somebody on the ground who understands the customs, who may be able to help get around those issues for you.
Can I just say something on from my Brazil point of view?
Please do.
Yeah. Don't touch it with a barge pole, especially in the current climate. Brazilians are very, very sensitive at the moment. It's one of the reasons why the UK is popular, because we have a reputation for not getting involved in corruption, and you can use that to your advantage. So you know, if the question somebody's making problems to sell a solution, these are things that, you know, you can bring up, saying, you know, in the current climate, you know, this isn't something that you should be doing. Just to point out that the UK has now got very strong anti-bribery legislation, which will hurt. But Brazil has also recently enacted extremely strong anti-bribery legislation, and they are vigorously enforcing it. So you don't want to go anywhere near unofficial transactions.
Thank you, Philip. And another question we've got in is from Gary, and he's asked about the benefits of exhibitions and conferences in Latin America, and just asking whether they're useful, and presumably they're quite expensive as well to get over across to. So how worthwhile are those exhibitions? Jeff, do you want to start on that?
Yeah, I've had experience of good ones and bad ones. I'll let Philip obviously talk about the Brazilian ones, which I found to be a lot more beneficial. I suppose at the end of the day, it depends on your industry sector. They are definitely worthwhile, but they are pricey. They are very pricey in Latin America for what they are. And if you compare them with the footfall you get through in the Far East for exhibitions, you're not going to get the same amount of people. But what I did tend to find was that even though they were advertised as international exhibitions, particularly in Mexico, massive percentage were Mexicans that were at the exhibition. Do a lot of research into exhibitions before you go. Like I say, I've had good ones and I've been to bad ones, but they are definitely worthwhile as far as getting your brand out there and getting people to come and see you. You know, in one place you can get more customers. So it's just about good research, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I would echo that. Exhibitions are a great idea. Really good ones in Brazil. There's a sort of focus around Sao Paulo for major exhibitions, and they're great to exhibit at, but they're also great to go around and see what's going on. I've helped several clients now to exhibit in a number of sectors, and the conversations are great, the exposure is really useful, this sort of serendipity, you know, unknown factor comes into play. You find people will pitch up at the stand and you know, they're key movers and shakers in the sector, and you've got them at your disposal where you'd find it really difficult to get a meeting with them otherwise. So I'm very much in favour of exhibitions.
Thank you both. So we're going to ask a couple more questions, starting with one from Ling Ji, and the question is around opportunities for UK vocational education providers, and to make it a bit broader, what is the opportunity for kind of education kind of companies in South America and then Brazil? So starting with Jeff again and then Phil to get the Brazil angle.
Well, I'll be honest, it's not an area that I'm an expert in as far as education is concerned, but again it would be down to doing your research and whether or not you have the material and the support material to be able to interact with the people you're going to provide it for. In other words, the language. And you know, do you have the people, not only the materials but the people to be able to do this? There is masses of opportunity out there for education, for obviously people teaching English. So again, it's on a case-by-case basis. Do your research through places like the Market Access Database or other portals where you can get an insight into what the actual structure is at the moment and the opportunities, and obviously who you're competing against in relation to the services you're going to provide. I certainly wouldn't say it's not a no-go, but I certainly would say as far as a service is concerned, like the other service question, I think you do need to do a lot of research due to the fact that you have to support that service, and it's a long way to support that service and the costs involved with that. So you do need to make sure your due diligence is done thoroughly.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Jeff says. What we found though in Brazil, looking at some areas, especially senior management or highly technical education, is to just remember their liking for travel. And so we found several situations where Brazilians are actually willing to come to the UK to be trained. So they've had a very successful university promotion scheme running where they send very bright students out to universities in the UK and other countries as part of their degree and postgraduate qualifications. So a lot of people are used to travelling for education. So you may find that you don't need to set up in territory at all. It's maybe a marketing process of getting people to come here.
Thanks, Philip. And I think the last question we're going to do is, again, it leads to a point you made, Jeff, earlier on, just about Venezuela, and I think we may touch upon it in one of our earlier questions, but why is Venezuela such a complex market to do business in? And obviously there's political reasons, but kind of other reasons as well.
Well, you've just answered it. It's political. It's not an area you would go without having a very good relationship or a partner out there. who you were going to meet, who was going to actually take you around. It's you know, it's all down to the system, the way the system's run. There is a lot of opportunity. Obviously, you've got the oil and gas there, but another good route into Venezuela actually is, if you are doing business in Latin America, is either through some of the buying houses in Miami, or there's quite a lot of businesses set up in the Netherlands who deal directly with Venezuela. To be honest, it's just the political unrest in the country itself. It's a brilliant place to go, but if you haven't got that third-party support, then personally I wouldn't go without that sort of like support, due to the fact of, you know, the situation as it is. But the business is there, and there are other routes into that market.
Thank you, Jeff. And I think on that note, I think it's probably time for us to wrap up. Thank you once again, both Jeff and Philip. Some really useful tips and guidance, and some really great answers as well. Really good Q&A session. So a fantastic session. Thank you both.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks, Will.
So just before going, I'd like to remind everyone that we will be posting these questions onto the forum in the aftermath to this webinar. So please do keep your eyes peeled for these, and also let us know if you'd like to withdraw your question from this process. You have only a few more days now to enter the Export Action Plan competition. We're going to be running a few different finals for this competition, including finals for food and drink and creative and tech sectors. So there will be even more opportunities for you to win some great prizes. Make sure to get your action plan submitted to us before Friday this week, and as always, do get in touch with you if you have any questions about how to enter or the tool itself. And finally, the final part of the Beyond the EU series takes place on Tuesday next week at 3 p.m. We will be looking at North America, where we will have speakers from Altius International on Canada, the USA and Mexico. So please do sign up to that. That's all from us for now. Please do take our survey as you exit to let us know what you thought of the webinar, and to give us any suggestions for improvements or future topics. We hope you can make it to the next one, and for now, goodbye.